By the time I was 8 years old, my dad had sold all of his cattle, and he was cutting the pastures to sell the hay. At the end of every summer, he and the men would stack the square bales 20 feet high under the ragged tin roof of an old pole barn that the previous owner, long dead, had built. So thankfully I was too young to haul hay, and I would just explore in the barn and play all day while everybody else worked. And I remember just this clean, warm, rich smell of all that cut grass. And I remember how the hay dust was really coarse, and it would mix with your sweat, and it would stick to your arms and your neck, and it would itch like crazy as you're climbing among all those stacked hay bales. It was kind of like this just towering hay maze labyrinth, and it was really fun to play in. Once I stepped wrong and I fell 10 feet down into the center of all that hay. My little kid mind was sure that my sad carcass would be entombed there forever, like a forgotten pharaoh. I lived closer to my body than my mind in those days. Of course, my dad would never have left me there in that grassy grave. But the older I got, the more I did learn to live in my thoughts. Every kid develops abstract thinking, but I lost touch somewhere. And it happened in my faith too. Was the Christian's vision of heaven just a blank daydream set to an endless soundtrack of glistening harp drone and the vacant cooing of angels? So the question was in my mind, like, is that really all that we're hoping for? Is this kind of bodiless, ambiguous existence forever?
So, in the last, 5 or 10 years, when I've had this slow awakening to what the Bible actually teaches, it's been a real relief to me to realize that, the ultimate Christian hope is not that we're going to die and go to heaven. It's that we're going to be resurrected and heaven is coming here, and everything's going to be remade. We're going to work. We're going to have relationships. We're going to eat. We're going to build houses and all that kind of stuff, which is so much more exciting to me. And I think it completely shifts the whole way that you look at the world when you realize that, because for years, and I think there's a lot of people out there who are just like, well, the world can burn because it's all going to be gone in the end and we're all going to heaven, which is not true. Like, it matters what we do and the way that we treat the world and the way that we treat the people around us, because these are the people we're going to spend eternity with. This is the world that we're going to spend eternity with. Yes, it's going to be remade, it's going to be perfected, but Christ was still Christ after he was resurrected. The world is still going to be the world. We're still going to be ourselves. We're just going to be a more glorious version of what we were always have been.
What the church has historically taught is that Jesus is the firstborn from among the dead. In other words, that whatever Jesus is promised to us. And so we're going to follow him. And he was resurrected. And what that means is that he was, after death, himself, fully himself, recognizably himself, but also different, eternal, immortal, unconquerable, indestructible, apparently able to walk through walls, apparently able to travel great distances with little effort, and apparently able to eat and to drink, and apparently having scars from his former life as well. And so that's what we think will happen to us, is that we too will be resurrected as Jesus is just the first one.
So now I feel like I have this great motivation for what it is that I believe, and that motivation is that everything matters. Like my body matters, and the world matters, and what we do in the world matters, what we build in the world matters, because it all is going to have an ultimate purpose in the new world as God remakes it and perfects it.
Jesus' resurrected body has flesh and bone, has meat. When he calls himself Like it is, I'm not a spirit, I am flesh and bone. That's a pretty cool moment because it indicates that Jesus is not like a purely spiritual being, like walking around, even if you don't call him a ghost, like some kind of solid spirit being or something, but is flesh and bone, but apparently eternal.
I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but in Leaf by Niggle, this guy, he's a painter, and like he's always trying to paint this big tree, but he keeps getting sidetracked by, you know, having to help out his neighbor and all this other stuff. And he eventually dies and never finishes his tree, you know. But when he gets into, you know, Tolkien's version of the new creation, there is this magnificent tree there that he immediately recognizes as, you know, the thing that he was trying to create. And so the little things that we do in the current creation, I think, will find their fullest realization in the new creation.
All the beautiful things that humans create, whether they're made out of gold or tapestry or their clothing or food or whatever it is, that we will continually bring in our treasures and we'll continually bring in that which we've made. And one of the great controlling metaphors of the new creation, of the next life, is a wedding feast, and wedding feasts imply food. And so someone has to make the food. I mean, someone has to cook the food. I don't know like where the food comes from, or if we're still going to be killing sheep, or how it's going to work. I really have no idea, and no one else does either. But if there's food, someone's making it, unless we have all of a sudden the Enterprise and we have, you know.
Earl Grey hot.
The last verse of this song tells this story that was really just a major turning point for me, kind of a threshold moment. And I was going to China to visit this old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a long time. And he picks me up at the airport, and we're in the cab, we're riding back to his apartment. And we're catching up, and he says, "Oh, are you still writing songs? Are you still playing guitar?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And he just stopped, and he looked at me really seriously, and he leaned in, and he said, "You do realize you'll be doing that forever, right?"
Realizing all that kind of like really woke up my imagination and my mind to my faith in a whole new way, because I felt like it gave me something that I was excited about hoping for.
So right now we're making, because our souls are presently being formed for eternity, and part of that formation is artistry and co-creation with God.
So in that moment in the cab in China, I knew that an important threshold had been crossed in this healing of a kind of rift between my body and my spirit. And it just got my imagination turning over and over about what is this hope that we have of resurrection and of the life everlasting.
I used to work with kids, and one of the problems that we would encounter is that, you know, kids who haven't grown up reading or being taught to understand story don't have a good appreciation for consequence. They don't immediately understand how actions cause reactions, and that what you do today affects what happens 5 years from now, that kind of thing. And so, but if you extend that idea, what it's saying is that somebody who doesn't have story, who doesn't have a developed imagination, is almost in a way can be incapable, or at least unpracticed at hope, because to be able to hope in something, you've got to be able to imagine it. And so one of the main functions that I see in storytelling and artistic creation is to inspire the imagination and develop the skill set within a person's mind to be able to see the world in a way that it is not. And if you can develop that imagination in people, then I think in some respects you're developing the possibility for a completely different world. that only imagination and hope can provide.
The world without end is just that, a real and endless world. A world where you will need your nerve endings to feel the itch of sweat and hay, your eyes to see the glow of light through a green leaf, your ears to hear the water lapping, your nose to smell the rosemary, your taste buds to taste a piece of fish like Jesus, who is just the first of many who will rise with beating hearts in flesh and bone.